what made you persist for nearly 50 years on a research without a clear direction?
Thank you. That's quite a question. It's very unusual, I guess, to have gone this long in one research project. And I have to thank, excuse me, the NIH where I work, because I don't think this long a duration study could have been done anywhere else. You had to have the freedom to pursue research where you really do not know the end point. But I think the lesson is that certain research needs to be given free rein. When we started out, our goal was to protect the blood supply, to find out why people were getting post-transfusion hepatitis, and to find out how often it happened, what caused it, and what could we do about it. The goal was initially not to discover a new virus. That's something that came along. And that's what happens, I think, in research. So we just followed one lead after the other. I couldn't stop at any point. It was just too good to give up. I was lucky to be healthy and to live this long.
In the field of understanding and fighting COVID-19, what kind of benefits can your research bring?
In terms of COVID should move much faster, because COVID, we already know what the viral genome is. We already know a lot about the disease. We have tests already for viral proteins and for antibodies. And it's a matter now of, I think, doing the same thing they did in hepatitis C, to look at the crystal structure of the virus, to figure out where the critical enzymatic replicative points are in the virus, and then develop designer drugs that will hit those points. I think that will happen, and I'm optimistic, and also the vaccines are on track, so maybe that will be available in 2021. So I think there's great hope, but the disease has gone on much longer than we anticipated, and part of that is because people have not been willing to follow the rules. I think if we were very careful about distancing and masks, the rates of infection would have been much less. The award has changed my life in the respect that I no longer have a life. My life has been taken away from me. As nice as the award is, it imposes many unexpected burdens, most of which I get these wonderful congratulatory emails, about probably 1,000 of them, telephone calls, letters, cards that I've never received before, and I'm trying to answer every one of them, and that has become a burden, but I'm working my way through the list. Secondly, I said, on October 4th, the day before the prize, I was just another scientist at NIH who tried to work hard and do stuff like every other one here. But on October 5th, I was suddenly a genius and a fountain of knowledge, and powers were given to me that I don't really possess. I'm really the October 4th person, not the October 5th person. But it is a life-changing event. It's wonderful.
视新闻的网友们，大家好，欢迎来到我们的遇见顶尖科学家访谈节目。我们现在是在上海黄浦江畔的上海国际会议中心顶尖科学家论坛的现场来做这样的一个访谈节目。那今天来到我们演播室的嘉宾，可能大家都已经认识了，去年也来过哈，他就是世界顶尖科学家协会的副主席，2013年诺贝尔化学奖的得主麦克莱维特教授。Nice to see you again, Dr. Levitt. Would you like to say something to our audience?
Certainly. Well, I'm very happy and very welcome feeling to be here.
Well, it has been 1 year since we met last year. A lot of things changed. And just let's start with your journey this time. And how is your stay in Shanghai?
We will be in Shanghai for 9 weeks, I think. 2 weeks in quarantines. There are actually no direct flights from Tel Aviv, where we were, to Shanghai. So we actually had a flight to Paris, and then be in Paris for half a day or 1 day, and then go from Paris to Seoul to Shanghai. So it took almost 3 days.
What drove you to make this decision to attend this forum here?
Well, my wife is a curator of Chinese art. So she needed to be here to arrange some exhibitions because it was at the beginning of the Autumn Moon Festival. And we live in Huaihalu. And we saw all these people, and we were so happy to see people. One forgets how much you get from seeing a person. We realized a beautiful thing about Chinese round table.
Yeah.
When you sit at a round table, you can see 10 faces. And that's a very special thing.
I remember in March or April, you sent me some of your reports which analyzed the trend of this COVID-19 pandemic. How long will this pandemic last, based on your research?
Okay, I think that the pandemic will last until people stop being worried about it. The pandemic is causing huge damage. So we need to basically, but I think I'm starting to believe that we need a vaccine.
So you have been using computers for many, many years, maybe 50 years, right?
I've been using computers for more than 60 years.
60 years. So how big was your first computer?
So I think, so in physical size?
Yeah.
So the computers would fill this room. It depends if I was lucky. So let me say, computers were very rare. There weren't many computers in the world. And you know, an average person, I mean, what's wonderful now is that any child who can access a smartphone, even a smartphone that's 10 years old, is more powerful than the biggest computer in the world. It probably occupied, if it was a small computer, it occupied the stage. But in order to use very big computers, I needed to go into science. So sometimes I think that it was my love of computers that made me become a scientist. And if you worked on very hard problems in science, you had access to computers.
We noticed that there are a lot of changes this year, and this forum this year has changed a lot also. Most scientists cannot be here in person, but we yet can talk to them online. What do you think of all these changes? What will this change transform the world in the future?
The work to arrange an online forum is actually much more. And especially here they have real forum as well as online forum. The recording is so difficult. It's also difficult for people to speak without an audience. It is not easy to speak to a camera without an audience. And the feedback from the audience is very important. So I think this is going to be fine, but I think that there is this kind of remote communication is no substitute for face-to-face communication. We need to go back to face-to-face communication.
I remember you mentioned before that you started your research very early, maybe in your early 20s.
Well, I started my research at 20. That was recognized when I was 65, was done when I was in my 20s, early 20s. And this is true of most Nobel laureates. They get the recognition. And that makes sense because when I did the research, I thought it was important. I loved the research, but I didn't do it for a Nobel Prize.
There's another question. As you mentioned, it is very important to choose a right to choose a right direction. Just like you started your research in your early 20s, which led to a Nobel Prize. So I think it is very important for young scientists or young people to choose a right direction. So how to make this decision smart?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question because I didn't want to go to Israel. I said, please don't send me there. Send me to Boston. Send me to Tokyo. Send me to an advanced country. This is 1967. He said, no, if you want to come and work in my laboratory, you have to go to Israel first for 1 year. So I agreed. In some ways, you have to try to get what you want. But if somebody very important says you should do something, maybe you do it. Mm-hmm. And it changed my life. I got my research direction. I met my first wife. My whole life changed in a very short time. My first son was conceived. So I think in life, the way you become lucky, if you think about life as being a lottery, so how do you become lucky? Well, firstly, you have to buy a ticket. If you never buy any tickets, so I just sit in my closed room with my television screen and don't ever try things. The way you become lucky is you try different things. If somebody says, would you like to learn to dance? I'm a terrible dancer. You try. Because maybe while you're learning to dance, you have an idea, oh, there's movement or something. But would you like to try new food? Be open to it. Be open to new suggestions because you don't know where the thing will come. Be open to new people. Meet people who are different from you. That's the secret, I think. And also, I think that, always believe that you are very good, even if you're not. Because if you don't believe in yourself, how will anyone else believe in you? It's very simple.
So just like an old saying, success always comes after you try.
Absolutely.
That's true.
You have to keep on trying.
And you also mentioned that a scientist is doing 90% wrong during the research. Why do you say that?
Well, I think you can think about research as traveling in an area that you don't know. Maybe like an ant looking for food. So an ant comes out of his hole and is trying to find food. But he doesn't have an iPhone that tells him where the food is. He can't smell the food from very far. So he keeps on going to different places. And he tries here, he tries there, and often he's wrong. But in science, you are trying to find new things. You're traveling to unknown countries in the mind. And when you do new things, you have to be wrong. If every time an ant didn't find food, he was killed, the ants would not survive. Life is full of looking for things. Now, when you find the thing, you have to have the instinct to say, this is good food, this is not ant poison. But I think you have to keep on looking. And what I actually said in that thing was that it isn't just a scientist, I would say for everybody, but a good scientist is wrong 90% of the time. But a great scientist is wrong 99% of the time because he's doing more difficult problems. If every day I'm right, then I'm doing too easy a problem. And I think this is not just true for me, it's true of a camera person, it's true of somebody who writes a script. You have to try sometimes makeup, try sometimes something new. Because if you always do something old, you will never learn.
So speaking of energy, would you like to give some advice on how to keep energetic and how to lead a healthier life in this pandemic?
I have a meditation practice. And I
just like this.
Exactly. It doesn't really matter what you do, and I think just try to be awake and not think. That exercise, for whatever reason, gives you energy, and sometimes and it's like as if you have in your head a room that is a quiet room, a green room before recording that you can go into if there's trouble or whatever, if you get upset, and I think that gives you a huge amount. The other thing is, I'm very, very lucky. I have a wonderful wife. We do interesting things together. Together we are much, much more than each of us. And I think we can do this with other people. In other words, you can get energy, but we both give each other energy. I'm not taking her energy, or maybe I am. I'm taking her energy, but I'm giving her my energy. So as together we all get this, I think.
So thank you so much for all the energy you give me in this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your energy too, and thank you to all the audience. Thank you.
那今天呢，莱维特博士呢也跟我们说了很多关于能量的事情哈。我相信大家从他的这个访谈当中也能够得到很多的启发。感谢各位网友收看我们今天的遇见顶尖科学家节目，谢谢。
Thank you all for watching. grid map is an empty map. So it's like longitudes and latitudes without a map. So you have a coordinate system.
Maybe you can say that the similarity to a GPS is that the system uses the rat's position and movement, speed, but doesn't care about what it looks like around. It just uses the change in position, just like a GPS.
I have had many best moments in. I think that passion is what is important in science. It's extremely hard work, and it's a kind of creative, art-like work. So if we don't have passion for it, then it's the wrong path for young or I think I would like to give the advice that they shouldn't think about themselves as women, but think about themselves as scientists that are curious.
But then when I was 8, my mother took me to a lecture about astronomy, about the solar system. And I became very excited about the idea of the solar system. So she did some projects with me about astronomy, and I started doing reading on my own. Decided I wanted to be an astronomer. But then when I was 13, I found a little paperback book called 1, 2, 3, Infinity by a physicist cosmologist named George Gamow. And it described ideas from mathematics and theoretical physics and cosmology that I found even more exciting than astronomy. And so at age 13, I decided I wanted to be a physicist. I began working on the theory of gravitational waves in the late 1960s. Gravitational waves are predicted to exist by Einstein's relativity theory. A gravitational wave is a ripple in the fabric of space and time produced by a violent source, such as colliding black holes or the Big Bang. And if we can detect these waves as they go by, it would be a whole new way to explore the universe. On September 14, I went to my computer, as I normally do first thing in the morning, and there was an email there. There's a possible gravitational wave detection, go look. It was a beautiful colored plot. It showed a beautiful chirp. Ooh. And I said to myself, oh my God, this may be it. That we can use the understanding we develop of the physical laws for technology, for human benefit. And so that aspect of it also is really quite wonderful. The power of science for understanding and for technology. But personally, the joy of discovery is the big deal. Popular culture has tremendous potential for inspiring people about real science. Interstellar was not an education process, it was more of an inspiration process. So I wrote a book to go along with the movie called The Science of Interstellar, which is my attempt to provide education in addition. But I think popular culture can provide tremendous inspiration about science and can convey some of the ethos of science.
Papillomaviruses are very widely spread in human populations. We know about 400 different types of papillomaviruses, but only a few of them are really related to diseases in humans. We guess about 99%. Cervical cancers has a link to papillomaviruses, and it's not clear whether the remaining 1 or 2% are not due to some agents, papillomaviruses, which we have not yet identified. But clearly they are the major cause of cervical cancer. But let me emphasize, not every woman who gets HPV gets cervical cancer, because in quite a number of instances, those persons are able to cope with this infection and to inactivate it by neutralizing antibodies and get rid of the virus. Many persons get rid of the virus by the immune system, by their own immune system, within a certain period of time. The answer is no. Unfortunately, it does not cure the existing papillomavirus infections. It prevents only new infections with those specific types of HPV. Vaccination will prevent the occurrence of cancer if it's given early enough. Once the cancer occurred, then the vaccine is not effective. There's no vaccination which is without any risk. And from some data which have been initially obtained in Australia, for instance, there's an indication that you can calculate with one side effect, which is a kind of an allergic reaction against the protein in the vaccine, which among 1 million vaccine recipients. So it's an extremely low rate of side effects. It was highly exaggerated in the press in the past, and except for the fact that you have a reddishness at the vaccination site, you may have occasionally a very minor degree of fever, but basically it's a very, very safe vaccine.
Why do you also encourage males to be vaccinated while they obviously will not, get a cervical cancer?
That's certainly true. They don't get cervical cancer, but nevertheless, the males are the main transmitters of the agent. I mean, males in average globally have more sexual contacts during their lifetimes than females of the same age groups. And males are mainly spreading this virus quite effectively. In some populations in particularly is the rate high. If they are promiscuous, I think the rate is even higher. So to vaccinate males is protective, first of all, for their partners, but secondly, also for the males themselves, because penile cancers or pharyngeal cancers in males are also due to the same types of viruses as in females, although they are much less frequent than those in the cervical side. There was not a recommendation for vaccination here in Germany above the age of 25. But let me emphasize it again. If a person didn't have sexual contacts before, and if it could have been 40 or 50, and if you would have sexual contacts then it would be still worthwhile that he got vaccinated prior to this stage, then still the vaccine would be effective.
Was it your dream, when you were a young boy, that one day you would get the Nobel Prize?
Not really. No, nobody can judge it. But I once made a joke when I will go to study medicine, work in research, and receive finally the Nobel Prize, which was a joke. But he reminded me indeed of the story when I received the prize.
各位央视新闻的网友们，大家好，欢迎大家收看《未来大猜想2020遇见顶尖科学家访谈节目》。那我们现在呢
2020 the future, and currently We are at the Laureates Forum in Shanghai, so please allow me to introduce to you first of all the guests. They are from Stanford Medical School and also Nobel laureate Mr. Roger Kornberg. We have another guest which is quite familiar to you, I believe. Dr. Zhang Wenhong from Fudan Affiliated Hospital. We know that Mr. Zhang is not only a medical expert, he is also a great publicizer and educator in terms of medical information and knowledge. We have two more guests to join us online. They are from Oxford University, John Bale. And he is now the chief medical expert of Oxford University, and he has a lot of knowledge concerning the COVID-19 containment in the UK. We also have Professor Kiesman online. So today our theme is global COVID-19 containment. And currently, the registered number of cases of COVID-19 around the world is about 40 million, and on a daily basis, the death rate is up by 40% in Europe. So Europe is now undergoing a second wave of COVID-19. So things has been quite difficult and urgent for all these people around the world. So we will be, first of all, giving the floor to each of the guests to have a short speech.
包括之前我们听到这个饶教授在上一个论坛当中所提到的之前的一些流行病的这个治疗。那么现在呢，讲到药物的开发，通常呢要在10到15年的时间，从化合物一直到这样的一个临床的实验。那比方说，这样的一个新药开发过程，可能是从这个1万个甚至更多的这个药品的组成当中，能最终成功一个。谢谢。齐兹曼教授，下一位贝尔教授，能不能请您发言？
But then, since then, the government's been pretty effective at rolling out 2 or 3 major programs that have been helping to modify the course of the disease. The first was testing. The testing system for the virus was largely baked into our healthcare system.
那么病毒的测试呢，其实是在我们整个医疗体系当中，在英国叫做 NHS 的医疗体系。那么英国的 NHS 并没有做大规模的检测的能力，他们没有充分的技术，所以呢，政府呢就新建了很多新的实验室。就这一周我们达到了一天50万的一个测试的一个量，达到了这个目标。那么这个都是从无到有的，在英国是从无到有做出来的，所以对于我们的这个响应啊，疫情的响应是至关重要的。
Thank you so much, Dr. Bell. I believe what you mentioned are all very important things, and we have got a lot of questions to ask you later. Now, I would like to introduce you one of our guests, Dr. Zhang, who is famous for his experience in fighting against the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Dr. Zhang, would you like to share your experience?
Thank you very much for Chairman inviting me to attend this summit meeting. Actually, I came from China. I'm an ID doctor, and in the past 10 months, actually I experienced everything in my country.
真的是亲身经验了我们这个国家所发生的事情。我的团队去了武汉，我们加入了整个武汉的抗疫当中，来对抗疫情。那么当时武汉是中国的这个疫情中心，那我的团队呢也待在这个武汉，待在这座城市。那么
we had a lot of worry about
当时非常的担心
in this
非常担心这个超大型城市的疾病的传播。但是呢，好像一切，武汉现在包括中国，好像看起来疾病已经烟消云散了。但是我们知道这个疾病呢是具有传播性的，而且是传染病，在1918年以来最严重的一次。6月份、7月份的时候，我们也看到了全球的这个疫情的爆发。也是非常的不幸，也看到现在全球的疫情还是时有抬头。那么现在第2波的疫情，在世界各地都可以发现第2波的疫情，所以今天的话，我们是没有这种侥幸的机会。比方说，在现在这个时间节点，就彻底的来消灭这样的一个病毒。我们现在比较现实的是怎么样来控制这个病毒。所以不管是西方的文化，或者是东方的文化，我觉得双方都很重要。一方面呢，我们要去采取这种非医疗的手段，尤其在当下非常的重要。比方说在西方的这些国家，这个非常重要，因为第2轮在西方国家更严重。那么在疫苗上市或者药物上市之前，这种非医疗的介入依然是非常重要的，但是长期而言，那么讲到未来，我相信没有疫苗或者药物的话，我们是没有办法来停止病毒的传播。那么现在，病毒在全世界都可见，所以我们依然。我们现在是从这个疫情到疫情得到彻底控制之前的这么一个阶段，所以我们现在要控制的是消灭这样的一个传播。那当然我很高兴的看到，不管是东方还是西方，现在有更多的这个共同点、共同的做法，就是我们共同携手来对抗疫情。中国现在也参与了这个疫苗的这个研究的全球行动，所以对我们也非常重要的一点呢，就是一定要合作。科学家要合作，来进行疫苗和药物的研发。
当然，我们还面临一个挑战，就是政治方面的挑战。
address that before we forget what we have already suffered during this pandemic. But the memory of the general public and especially of the politicians is very short. And we all know that they will move as soon as possible to whatever is the next most critical political question. It will be a challenge for all of us to preserve the focus upon this issue. Lastly, Professor Zhang Wenhong has emphasized the importance of non-pharmaceutical measures. And there especially we see the failing in America, which highlights the importance of non-pharmaceutical measures, where almost every other country, almost without exception, has embraced those measures. The United States, for reasons of politics well known to all here, has failed entirely, and the consequences are clear. Most recently, the Chief of Staff of the President of the United States said, "We will abandon all such efforts." In effect, declaring the country and all of its people fair game for infection by the virus. I think the challenges that we face are both scientific, the development of drugs and vaccines, especially for the future, and also political, and that must be remembered, and it is the responsibility of the public who we attempt to inform through this broadcast, to remind those who are responsible for administering their countries to learn the lessons of this experience and to apply them to protect us in the future.
Okay, let's get into the second part. We're going to discuss some questions. We have two experts from Oxford University, so let's start with the epidemic in Europe. The World Health Organization has described Europe as the epicenter of the global pandemic. So, Professor Zisman, what are the reasons behind the rebound of the epidemic in Europe?
So this might actually be a question that is where Sir John might be better positioned to answer this.
Do you want me to come in on this? I think the general consensus is that the initial lockdown that most European countries put in place from about March on was extremely successful. And in fact, the population of most European countries obeyed the lockdown. They had a very powerful effect in suppressing transmission of the disease. And so by the middle of June, the numbers of new patients with the disease had fallen off quite dramatically. But then at that point, in an attempt to get the economies going again, they really relaxed the constraints on the population. And through the summer, we saw a complete lack of social distancing. People felt that the disease is no longer a threat. And I think the behavior over the summer in most European countries, people going on holiday, taking up life as it was before, actually set the stage for the second wave, which, as you know, began in September, early September, in southern Europe, and is now hammering Europe.
Okay, so what's the difference between this new wave and the previous one?
Well, there's several differences. One is it started with younger people. So if you look at the demographic of the age group of the people infected in late summer and the autumn, it tended to be younger people than it was in the first wave. And that's one of the reasons why the mortality was lower. And that was largely because these were people who weren't obeying social distancing in the summer. And they were the ones who were getting infected. So that's point number one. It's now moving into the more elderly age groups, though, and with it, the mortality is going up quite strikingly. The second thing is it looks like this wave is going to be bigger than the first wave. I think I'm not sure many people anticipated that, but it does look.
Okay, speaking of the second wave, let's go to look at the U.S. situation. U.S. also set records of coronavirus infections during the past week, and there are more than 8 million confirmed cases. So I would like to ask Dr. Kronberg, why is the number of the coronavirus cases rise so fast since October?
So I think the answer is the same as what we have heard from Sir John. It's due to a lack of adherence to what Professor Zhang referred to as non-pharmaceutical measures. Only the difference is that in much of the United States, they were never put in place at the beginning. So in the UK, in Germany, France, of course here in China, those measures were thoughtfully installed. They were highly effective. In Israel, where I've spent much of the last several months, they reduced the number of new cases to at most a few dozen a day.
So, Dr. Zhang, would you give some comments on it?
Okay. I think now really we stay in the second wave of the pandemic in the world. And now all the experts now found that it's very difficult for Western countries to take the similar non-pharmaceutical measures. Just once they open the society because of the economic reasons. However, the resurgence, it will be definitely
他们很难再去执行这个干预措施。
Today we just one side we should ask the citizens to take more non-pharmaceutical interventions because of the overwhelming medical resources. And the other side, we have to strengthen the process of the development of the vaccine and drugs. Once we have the vaccine, we can protect the vulnerable people or elderly people.
Yeah, speaking of asymptomatic, I think we all care about this. So since in Xinjiang,
无症状感染者，最近在新疆呢，我们也看到了很多的无症状感染者。
What do you think of asymptomatic cases?
那么，对于无症状感染者的传播风险，它的风险有多大？还有就是为什么有些人是无症状的，有些人是有症状的？
It's very difficult for us to find the asymptomatic
如果是
without
无症状
detection
的这个感染者，如果你不去做检测的话，我们真的是很难发现。 如果用 PCR 的话，其实是很难发现的。
Today in China, just like in Wuhan, we can do
其实，在武汉，
almost
我们几乎是可以
90 million people within 10 days.
10天可以检测9000万人，说是一个巨大庞大量的检测。就像大家所了解到，那么比方说最近中国的某个省份，比方说新疆，我们也是做了这种类似的大规模的检测。一旦我们发现了有一例，就会这样做。所以如果我们做更多的检测，我们就可以发现更多的无症状的感染者。但是这种传播的风险，如果我们做数据分析，我们就可以发现。 几乎50%的患者
get the infection from the asymptomatic patients.
是从无症状感染者那边感染来的。所以无症状的感染者，如果我们去做检测，我们就能找到这个传染源。如果不在隔离的情况下去做检测，不管是居家隔离，还是说集中去做隔离，这个不是问题。问题是你要做检测，你要检测到无症状的感染者，那你能为他们做隔离吗？如果没有隔离的话，那检测也是没有意义的。所以。 我认为各个国家不同的做法，比方说东方的国家以及西方国家的不同的做法。那么东方的国家呢，我们做检测，找到无症状的感染者，然后隔离。但是在西方国家，我们就跟你说，你是无症状感染者，你在家里待着吧。但是如果你不在家里待着，也没人关心，是吗？所以这个是问题所在。
Oh, okay. Let's talk about something on drugs and vaccines. Dr. Zisman, I know that you are working on drugs and vaccines, right? So, what's the progress you've made?
So I'm not working on vaccines at all. I work on drugs, and as you know, there is no cure for COVID yet. There are certain drugs, like for example, the repurposed remdesivir we talked about earlier, and that can help shorten hospital stay from an average 15 to 11 days, but doesn't really have an impact on mortality rate. And then there's dexamethasone that came out of the recovery trial, so John mentioned earlier, and that benefit really only kicks in at the point where people need oxygen, and overall, it still seems to be rapid access to oxygen and access to beds and well-staffed facilities that make really a difference on the mortality rate. So during a pandemic, it's really not the right time to start developing from scratch. So during the pandemic, we did what we thought was the most useful thing to do, and that was to quickly try screen already approved drugs and see whether we could repurpose them. And that's what my group has been very, very busy with since February, March. And that's what I mentioned. You really need to have a capacity increase on that area.
所以这就是我说的，一定要在这个领域多下功夫。
Dr. Zhang, from your experience, what kind of drugs are relatively effective when you treat those cases?
So recently there are some published papers announced that the neutralizing antibody it worked well, but of course in the future we still need more drugs like neutralizing antibody and direct acting agents to stop the replication of the virus. To neutralizing the virus, then I think we can stop the replication of the virus at a very early stage and stop the transmission within the land and stop the invasion of the disease in the human body. Then I think we can decrease the mortality of the disease. So once I was asked the question about when we can reopen our world, I only see that the time I cannot anticipate. But I know that once we decrease the mortality as low as the influenza, I think we can reopen the world. But without the direct acting agents, without a neutralizing antibody, without a vaccine, I think it's very hard for us to decrease the mortality of the disease as low as that in influenza. So recently we know that the second wave, the mortality now increased again.
How far can vaccine or drug research go relatively by the end of this year? Professor Bell.
By Christmas, we could probably get the definitive answer on another 5 drugs or so, which would be, I think, a real benefit. And by a definitive answer, I mean a really definitive answer where regulators would take that and approve those drugs for that basis. Vaccines have moved pretty quickly. I think it's very likely we will get a proper look at data from at least 2 vaccines by Christmas. Certainly the Pfizer vaccine, I think has been through at least one interim review. I think they have a set of rolling reviews with that vaccine, and they'll be looking again. That's an RNA vaccine. I think that's got a lot of promise. The AstraZeneca vaccine, again, is very close to the finish line. There are lots of cases now, so the limiting factor is the number of events you have to study. So as soon as the event number gets up to something which is statistically helpful, then the data can be analyzed and details of, I don't know the precise details of exactly how many cases they've had because we're keeping that strictly confidential to the statistical team. But common sense would tell you that given it's being tested in Brazil and the UK, there should be no shortage of people getting infected or potentially getting infected.
Once we have a vaccine, can we just rest assured?
No, I mean, I think there are lots of ways the vaccine could take the edge off the epidemic. But I think respiratory virus vaccines are hard, like very hard. We know the flu vaccine is not a great vaccine. It changes, of course, in the surface antigens mean that it has to be changed as the hemagglutinin and neuraminidase epitopes change from year to year. RSV, it's taken 30 years to produce an RSV vaccine. One of the problems with these vaccines is that they may stop or modify severe disease, so reduce the incidence of severe disease, but they don't stop transmission. So you still get viral replication in the nose. We have no idea how any of these vaccines are going to work in that regard for COVID, but I don't think you should assume that the first generation of vaccines are going to produce an absolutely sterilizing effect on the world's population. I think that would be an optimistic view of what we're
So, drug and vaccine, which shall we rely more on? Dr. Bell.
I wouldn't rely on one or the other. You need both. This is going to go on a bit. Even if we had a vaccine tomorrow, getting the vaccine into enough people to make an impact on public health will not be an easy job. So you need drugs and vaccines, and that's why many people are working simultaneously on both. That's certainly what we're doing in Oxford. We've got a massive program trying to discover and develop drugs, but also a big program on vaccines. And that's true, I think, globally.
So how far are we from a safe vaccine,
我
Dr.
真的很
Bell?
期待这个药物和疾病的和这个疫苗的上市。
Well, I think
那么
one
一
of
个
the
安
things that
全
we're
的疫
doing
苗，教
rather
授说安全的疫
effectively
苗
is
什么
we're
时候才
trying to
能
make
上
sure
市
they're safe. So there's a very, very extensive
现在其实我们在做的一个事情就
safety
是确保
element
它
to
们是
all the
安
trials.
全
So
的。
I suspect the drugs when the vaccines when they
因为
appear
这里面有
will
很
be
多的
safe.
临床实验当中
I
有很
think
多的
that
安
the
全
real
性的因
question is
素。
how
疫
efficacious
苗
will they
如
be?
果上市的话，一定要
You
安
know, it'd be
全。
nice if
所
you
以
had
现
a
在其实
vaccine
真
that
正的
was
问
100%
题，
efficacious. I
首
think
先
that's
呢是
highly
这个，比方说
unlikely.
药效。
The real question is,
那如果是
what about a
100%
vaccine that
的
works
有效，
by
那当然最好
reducing
了。但是
the
现在
severity of the
实际
disease
的
by
问题是，
50%? Would
有
that be
效的这个疫
interesting?
苗
And
能
in
够
my view, it
降
would be
低，比
interesting,
方说这个
particularly
疾
in
病
the
50%，
current circumstances.
那当然很有意思
So
了。那么在
I
我看
think
来，
that's the kind of detail
尤
that
其
we'll
是在
have to
现在
look
这种
at
情况
as
下，
these
如果有一个
vaccines
50%有
start
效
to
的
get
药的
rolled
话，
out.
就疫苗的话就非常好了。所以这个是我们还会继续来 关
Dr.
注的。
Kronberg, would you say something about international cooperation?
罗杰能不能
How
介绍一
shall
下
we
这个
strengthen
全球的合作，
international
怎么样能够
cooperation
加强国际合
fighting
作呢？
against COVID-19
来对
pandemic?
抗疫情，
distribution of vaccine,
包括疫
the
苗的这个生
unprecedented
产等
level
等
of。
那么
cooperation
现在全球对于抗击疫
with
情有
regard
着
to the basic
史无前例的
science
合
and the
作，也包括基
technology
础科学，
for
还有高科技方面
addressing
都
the
在进行
problem.
合作来对抗疫
It's
情。
very impressive
所
the
以
extent to which scientists around the
科学家
world
全球的这个科学家的这个合作，
devoted themselves
包括
to
这
this
个投入
problem, setting aside
真的
whatever
是
they may
让
have
大
been
家
doing
印象深刻。
and pursuing this by whatever means
不管通过什么
they can
方法吧，
think of doing at the
他
time.
们都在竭
And
尽全
those
力的
efforts have been shared.
来投入。那么这
They've
些
been，
而且
shared
他们的这些
because
投入、这些
the
努力都是全
magazines
球
in
分
which
享
their
的。
results are
比方
presented
说，他们可以在杂志
have
上
been
发表
made
文章，
open access
或者
rather
是
than
把
at
他们的
cost,
研究
and
结果
everyone
就是
can
免费
read
给大
what
家，而
is
不是说要
found.
收费，所以大家想去看都可
They
以
have
看
been。shared
而
in
且他们也
respect
分享
to
了
exchanging information
各种各样的信
between
息，
laboratories,
比方说实
exchanging
验室
reagents
的
between
信息，
laboratories
这个制
to
剂的
an
信
extent
息
that has
等等。
never occurred in
这
the
种合
past.
作在以前是
International
从来没有
cooperation
发
at the
生过
level
的
of，science
所以在科学界的这种
has been
合作，
not
全
only
球的合作
extraordinary, but I
不
think
仅仅
that
是
will be
非
long
常
lasting.
显著的，而且
I
我认
think
为
those
将是
relationships, once they
持
are
续很
formed,
长时间的。 一
will
旦这些
persist.
合作
In
形成了
respect
之后，
to
就
open
将会
access
持
to
续发展
information,
而且这
it's
种
interesting
信息
that
现
for
在
the
的
first
开放
time,
度是有
many
史以
of
来
the
第一
favorite
次。
places in which to publish scientific data have come under great pressure.
那么我们知道
to
以
make
前的话，
their,
一些科学数据都是面临着很大的这个压力，
generally available
因为
at
以
cost
前的
or for
话
free.
它都是并不是
There
完
will
全
be
免费
other
向世
examples
界
in
开
which
放的，
the
还有一些其他的例
cooperation
子。
that has taken place during the last 6 to 9
在过
months
去的6到9个月当中，还有
will
很
be
多的合
extended
作，
over time
我相
with
信在未来
long-lasting
将会
benefit.
持续的给大家带来益处。
So, we're going to an end.
好了，
Would
我们
you
接下来
like
接
to
近尾
give
声
some
了。那么接
advice
下来，
for the public
我
on
们想给公
how
众
to
提一些
live a
建议，
healthy
怎么样
life
才能够
during this pandemic?
在疫情当中
Dr.
保
Zhang.
持健康的生
Okay,
活。
I think today the summit meeting gave us
今
the
天的
hope
这个
for the future of the
会议
human
呢，
beings.
其实给人
Today
类
we
带
stand
来了希
together,
望。
and
今天的我
tomorrow
们
we
紧
will
密协作，
win
明
the
天
battle
我们
against
将
the
会赢得
virus.
此次战役。
Okay. Dr. Kronberg.
So I would echo that remark and only use different words that
我呢
we
完全同意，但是我换种
the
说法。
public should know not
大
to
家要
let the guard down now.
知道啊，千万
They
不要
should know
放
that
松
this
警
is
惕。
still a dangerous disease.
现在这个疾病
And
还
even
是
though it
很
has gone
危
on for
险
a
的
long time,
虽然
they
说已经有
must
了一段
remain
的时
vigilant
间了，但是呢，还是要
and
保持警
protect
惕，
themselves through
保护
what
好自己。
Dr. Zhang has
就
referred
像
to
文的文宏所说的这些非医疗性的措施保持这个卫生等等很重要。所以我们想传递这样的一个信息，就是有希望，而且呢，在不那么远的将来，我们能够正常的生活。
Would you like to choose one word to define 2020? Dr. Bell.
Sorry, define what one word to?
Define 2020.
Oh, challenging.
Challenge. Yeah. I hope that you can overcome this challenge. Okay, Dr. Zisman, would you like to choose one word to sum up the year 2020?
Just not to reuse John's word, I will say hopeful.
Well, good, hopeful. And could you please give some advice to the public on how to live a healthier life in the pandemic?
Well, again, not to repeat what everybody else has said, so just a slightly different angle. I think once we're out through this one, we will all be so relieved that we will soon forget this pandemic again. And I just hope that we will not forget this. It's difficult to believe this while we're in it, but let's not forget this when we're out of it and be better prepared for the next one.
Okay, Dr. Zhang, give a word to define 2020.
Solidarity.
Thank you so much.